All right. Thank you all for joining us. We're so glad to see you. We are here to celebrate student writing and student creativity. And we're doing that by talking about the Young Writers Contest here at KET. And it's a contest that's been around for a long, long time. In recent years, we keep adding and changing and doing some new things, which this year happens to be the graphic novel category. And we're so excited and blessed that Benito Sereno is here today to speak with you. He has a long list of credits. He is the perfect person to speak to you about graphic novel creation and that process. And so in a few minutes, we're going to turn it over to him. But I do want you to be aware that on that Young Writers Contest, it's open for all grade levels, from pre-K all the way up through high school. So if you have children at home or students who are interested in writing anything from illustrated stories to graphic novels to even short stories and even poetry, we would love for you to have them send that work in and help us publish your students' work. We have a great team of judges who score those pieces, and then we announce winners and give prizes. And you can see past winners and hear some of those past winning authors on the website at ket.org/writers contest. So we hope to see some of your work, but in the meantime, we're here to learn. And we want to know more about graphic novels and creating and all the inspiration and the process that goes into that. So I'm going to hand it over to Benito. Thank you for being here.
Excuse me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Let me get this screen up here. Introduce myself a little bit. Let's turn this into a slideshow. All right. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Benito. I'm a writer. I write a lot of different things, but my favorite thing to write is comics and graphic novels. And so let me start by saying thank you to Amy and Lynn and everybody at KET. This is such a cool contest and program and workshop and everything. When I was in high school, I used to do, that's gonna happen. My cats are gonna fight, I'm sorry. When I was in high school, I did writing contests all the time, but I used to have to write short stories and plays because graphic novels was not an option. So I would have been incredibly stoked if I could have done comics for a writing contest when I was in high school. So I hope you all appreciate how very cool this is. A little bit about who I am, a couple books I've done. These are a couple of my creator-owned books, ones that I came up with that I co-own with the artist on these books. This one, it was my first solo graphic novel with artist Graham McDonald. This cover is by Tony Moore, the original artist on The Walking Dead, if you guys know that book, by a couple of guys from Kentucky you might have heard of. But this one is a action sci-fi comedy about Teddy Roosevelt and the ghost of Thomas Edison traveling through time and fighting Hitler on Mars. It is based on true events. This one, Hectoplasm, is a kind of paranormal adventure style book, kind of in the vein of something like Hellboy or Supernatural or something like that. He is part of an ancient cult that can see ghosts and witches and whose job is to protect the living from the dead and vice versa. But I have also worked on some properties you might have heard of. I wrote some spin-off books from the title Invincible, which right now is best known because of the Amazon Prime animated series that's made by its original creators, Robert Kirkman and Cory Walker. I did a spin-off series about two of the main supporting characters, Adam Eve and Rex Splode. And then I also did a spin-off book about the Guardians of the Globe, which is the main superhero team. Although this cover features a lot of characters who have not been on the show yet. But there's Robot and Monster Girl and Black Samson. They're all on the show. I have nothing to do with the show, by the way. So sorry about that. I'm especially sorry because I do not get Amazon Prime money. But I am hoping that they'll maybe do a story based on my Adam Eve origin, maybe in the next season or something. Another book I worked on was The Tick, which has also had a show, included also one on Amazon Prime. It's had like 3 different shows. It was an animated show when I was in high school, and I was a big fan of it. But most recently, there's been a 2-season Amazon Prime live action show. But I wrote this. I'm still working on it a little bit when they let me, but mainly from about 2009 to about 2012, I wrote the main Tick series, including the special issue where the Tick and Invincible got to meet each other. And I also do not have anything to do with the Tick TV show. I do not get any money. And now the show is canceled and there'll never be one based on one of my comics. But anyway, so that's who I am. But I want to talk to you guys, since you guys are the high school group. I know you're a little bit older than some of the other groups that have been meeting with these workshops. And I don't know if you've watched any of those other videos, which I do recommend you should do. But those tended to focus a little bit more on theory. And I understand that you guys are a little bit older. You don't need me to tell you like, this is what a panel is, or that the gutters between panels represent a transition in time. You guys get that. You're older. You have questions like, what kind of paper should I use? That's the question that I had when I was 14, 15, trying to make comics. So I want to focus a little bit more on practical questions that you might have, commonly asked questions. But before that, if you do want to know more about theory, if you do want to know more about the ideas behind comics, I have a couple of book recommendations for you. Number one, the essential one, in my opinion, is Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. This is the book that will help you understand like what is comics as an art form, as a medium, thinking about different art styles, what it means to put things on a page, that kind of stuff. This is key. McCloud also did 2 later books that followed this up called Reinventing Comics and Making Comics. Reinventing Comics was really about the digital revolution in comics. It's a little dated. I don't necessarily super recommend it. Making Comics is good, although if you want to know, if you want to see a book that gives good information about making comics, I recommend this one, Drawing Words and Writing Pictures by Jessica Abel and Matt Madden. This gives a number of really great lessons on best practices for making comics, not just drawing, but inking, lettering, page layouts, everything like that. Here's a classic. Every bookstore has this. I've seen this at Walmart. They have it. How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. This book is from the 70s. It's by Stan Lee. You've heard of that guy. You saw him in the movies talking to the Watcher or whatever. And then John Buscema, who was one of the main Marvel artists in the 70s. Is this book a little old-fashioned and a little bit corny? Yes, it is. Does every professional working artist in comics in America have a copy of this book on their bookshelf right now? Yes, they do. So I do recommend this one if you don't have one already. I also recommend this. Comic Book Lettering by Nate Picos, who's one of the main guys in lettering. Lettering is kind of the invisible art of comics. It's if it's done really well, you don't even notice it. And that's an important thing because a lot of times it's not done well. Here's a pro tip for you guys. The number one thing that's going to set your comic off as looking amateurish is bad lettering. If I open up a book, I can immediately see bad lettering and I go, this one's not for me, right? But good lettering is key. And this book's not just for letterers, because lettering is an essential part of the comics process. That is literally putting the balloons with the words in them, right? Sound effects usually are often done by the letterer as well, who might be the artist as well. I work in traditional American monthly comics, which is a different process than somebody who's doing a graphic novel, maybe all by themselves. But in a monthly comic, generally the writer, the penciler, the inker, the colorist, the letterer are all different people because it's faster to produce books on a monthly schedule that way. And so this book has good advice for a writer writing to make things easier for your letterer. Like, for example, knowing that 25 to 30 words is basically the absolute maximum that looks good in a single balloon. Anything more than that is too much. Artists can learn things about leaving space for balloons. Absolutely important. So anyway, this is really good book, absolutely worth your time if you want to really understand the nitty-gritty of making comics. I also firmly believe that if you want to make comics, you should know about the people who came before you and made comics. What is the history of comics? And so I recommend this one, The Comic Book History of Comics by Fred Van Lente and Ryan Dunleavy, which is actually, like it says, it is a comic book that tells you the history of comics. It's got it all. And basically one of the main characters in that book, I mean, again, it's true history, so he's a real person, was Jack Kirby, who in my estimation, the best, most important American comics creator of all time. So I do recommend this book, Kirby, King of Comics by Mark Evanier, which has a ton of art across Kirby's career. It's a really nice, really big art book combo biography, because you learn about the life of Kirby and the career of Kirby. It's a mirror for the history of American comics. So I do recommend these two things. There's tons of other books that are like prose style books, like The 10-Cent Plague is a good one as well, if you want to know more about the history of American comics. So these are just a couple of quick recommendations. If you want to know more about comics background, theory, thoughts, ideas behind comics, and that kind of stuff. So now I want to transition into this question. This is probably the most asked question for a comic book writer after these questions, which the most common one is, oh, comics have writers. I didn't know that. What does a comics writer do? Do you put the words in the bubbles? That's the most common question for comics writers. But after that, the most asked question is, what does a comic book script look like? What should I, as someone who wants to write comics, what should my story look like, right? Like physically on the page. And the answer to that is there's no set answer. There's no set format, because comic scripts are not really meant to be published and read, right? The point of the comic script is it's a communication of ideas from you, the writer, to the artist, and that you might be the same person if you're doing the same one. But if you're doing both, if you're doing writing and art, it might be the same person. But the script is a communication of ideas from the writer to the artist. It's like a letter that you're writing to somebody else. So it's not super, there's no one set format way of doing that. However, there are different ways, there are common ways, and some ways are better than others. I want to show you first a page of comic script by one of the most famous comics writers of all time, generally regarded as one of the best, if not the best of all time by a lot of people. Alan Moore, a British writer who's written books you might have heard of, like Watchmen, V for Vendetta, From Hell, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. All those have been made into movies that he hates. But I want to show you the first page of the script from his most famous book, Watchmen, which has been a movie, it's been a TV show. Sorry, this is a little bit blurry, but this is the first page of the Watchmen script by Alan Moore. And you might notice a couple of things. One, it's in all caps. Number two, it's a lot of words. And so many words that you can see the artist, Dave Gibbons, has gone through and highlighted the important things. Now, another thing you might notice is up at the top, that says panel 1. Here's a little bit closer, right? Panel 1. Sorry, it's blurry, but this is the highest resolution I could find. But it says panel 1 up at the top. Do you see anywhere on here that says panel 2? Nope. This page is for one panel. Why? Well, because Alan Moore has a very clear idea of what he wants this book to look like, what he wants the whole page to look like, and he wants to establish these ideas in a thematically resonant way. And part of this panel description is him actually talking to Dave Gibbons and saying, hey, we're getting started on this book. Here's what things are going to be like. Here's what this is going to. And so that's part of why it's so, there's so much stuff, but you can really see the actual visual information here is what has been highlighted. And just to show you, so this whole panel, this whole page, one panel, all caps. So all this description, and here's what that panel looks like. This is it. All of that was for that. I did that. I showed you this because I wanted to give you a mild anxiety attack, and I hope that I did. And the fact is, most comic scripts do not look like this. Here's a much more normal comic script. This is by Matt Fraction. The artist is Steve Lieber. This is from an issue of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen from, I don't know, a year or two ago. You might know Matt Fraction if you watched the Disney Plus Hawkeye series. That show is based very heavily on a Hawkeye series that he did at Marvel, but this was a book he did at DC. And I wanted to show you this. This is a much more standard looking script. Like, unless you're Alan Moore, and you're probably not, statistically speaking, watching this right now, you're probably not Alan Moore. Unless you have an extremely clear idea of what you want the visuals to mean thematically on the page, you probably don't need to write a full page of all caps description per panel. Generally speaking, a good rule of thumb is If you can fit the panel description in a tweet, that's pretty good. So unless you're writing a really important panel where you're describing a new character or a new setting where you need to go into detail, otherwise something like this, okay? And so what's cool about this is you also have the line art here. This would have obviously been colored and lettered in the actual published thing with this dialogue. But you can compare, right? Panel 2, Doc points aha and begins to go into a whole spiel, but Janie cuts him off. And you can see that, right? Here's the Doc, finger up, aha, Janie cuts him off. And then what would they be saying in that panel? Ah, well, analysis of the galactic idiom, etc. Right? And so you put the dialogue down here. This is an extremely common format for a script. This is the closest of all of these that I'm going to show you. This is the closest to what I do. I'll also show you an example of what I do. But here is a script by Dan Slott, who is a writer for Marvel. This was for the series She-Hulk. The artist here, I believe, is Juan Babio. But you can see here the descriptions over here, Jin's graduation, she's in a cap and gown, blah, blah, blah. But what you might notice that's missing, that's on the final page, but that's missing over here is the dialogue. This is an example of what's called a Marvel style script. Not everybody at Marvel does this anymore, but for a long time, the standard way of writing a script was to write the story first and not even always panel by panel breakdown like Slott does here. But I might just do a page. I might say page 1, here's all the things that need to happen on page 1. Then the artist would take that, they would break it down into panels like this, getting from point A to point D or whatever the writer said needs to happen on the page. And then once the art is done, or at least the pencils are done, the writer goes back and adds the dialogue on the top to make it match the art, right? And so that's what was called Marvel style, because that was based on the style that Stan Lee established in the 60s. And I want to show you Stan Lee, obviously the most famous comics writer of all time. You guys know him. He was in the movies. This is what a Stan Lee comics plot looked like. In fact, this is what 3 Stan Lee comic plots look like. This is 3 issues. Here's one. Here's the Fantastic Four plot. And here is a plot for a Captain America story from an issue of Tales of Suspense. And in fact, let's zoom in on this. It's again, I'm sorry, it's low resolution, it's a little blurry, but this is it. This right here is what Stan Lee gave to Jack Kirby and said, make it 12 pages, see you later, right? And he says, here's who the villain is, here's who the heroes are, here's the setting, these elements need to be included, the Adaptoid, which is he was a human, and then change the locale so it's not all at the Avengers headquarters. See you later. And Jack Kirby would go off and draw the whole thing, coming up with basically the whole story himself, and then Stan Lee would come back in and write dialogue over the top of it. And so the Marvel style of plotting and scripting was based off of how Stan Lee did things. On the flip side of that, you can also have thumbnail or layout style scripting. This one's not super common, but this is John Stanley, who, in my opinion, is one of the funniest writers who ever worked in comics. He did a lot of kids comics, Little Lulu, Nancy, and those kind of things. But he would write scripts as layouts. He would draw basically these thumbnail versions of what he wanted to be on the page, and then actually write the dialogue onto the page. So he was basically making this kind of sketch version of the comic that he would then either pass on to another artist or that he would then draw himself, right? I will say this script, the final published version of this is nothing like what this script looks like. This is the first appearance of a supporting character called Una Goosepimple, who's a very funny kind of Wednesday Addams style character. The final version doesn't even have Sluggo in it. So it's a completely different thing. One person who used this style, I will say, Jim Shooter, who went on to become editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics in the 1980s. He started writing Legion of Superheroes for DC Comics when he was 14 years old, and he used to do this kind of script, although he would just use stick figures. And then he would show, here's what the panel should be, and then he would write the dialogue on the top like that, and he would submit his scripts that way when he was 14 years old. If you guys are in Kentucky, Jim Shooter is going to be at the Lexington Comic-Con, which is this weekend. It starts tomorrow. So he would be a good person to go and talk to. He is a guy who really, really, really knows comics. I mean, he's done everything, been everything. Might be worth doing. Oh yeah, okay. So let me switch over now because I want to show you what I do. Let me show you an example of one of my own scripts. This is unpublished. Nobody has seen the story. This is an exclusive material. But this is a comic I've written. The artist has the script and he's been working on it. It is about Santa Claus, which is true of most of the stories I write these days. That's just a fact about me. You've just learned about me. I like to write about Santa Claus. But I want to show you a couple of things that I've done here. Normally, right here, I have these links. These are links to reference material, both for myself and for the artist. Normally what I would do in this space up here is I would do my page by page breakdown. That's an important thing. Outlining your story ahead of time is really important. I would do, however many pages the story is going to be, an average issue is 20 to 22 pages. I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I would break down what needs to happen on each page, making sure that important, surprising things happen on even numbered pages so that there's a page turn, because you can't control how fast someone reads. So the best you can do to create suspense is make important things happen on the back side of a page, right? So normally I would use that space for this, but usually I delete that after I've actually written the script. But the other important thing here is you can see, here's the page. I also say the number of panels on the page up at the top so that the artist has an idea of how much space they need to be devoting to each idea. On the page, right? Then, as I said, this is a little bit longer than a description I would normally use, but I'm trying to establish the setting for the artist so he knows. And again, I've included a direct link to a photo that's like, it should look something like this, right? Then down here, I've got the dialogue. I indicate that there's a caption. It says this. There's a sound effect. Where the sound effect goes, here's what those words are. Also notice these numbers 1, 2. I'll show you what that's for in just a second. Panel 2, here's what we see, more sound effects down below. Again, numbered, SFX here, you get it, it's for sound effects. But these panels have no dialogue, so I indicate no dialogue. And then, page 2, 9 panels, the artist knows. Here's a thing that you should do that I don't do, so this isn't an example of do as I say and not as I do. You should hit enter to start each new page on a fresh actual page of word processor or printed out. That makes it a lot easier for the artist. I don't do that because I don't know why. I should. It would be better. It would make things easier for everyone. But I don't. Anyway, so why do I include these numbers, right? So I rolled them over once I got to page 2. 1, 2 by these balloons. So let me switch back to my presentation here. So so here is a rough layout thumbnail style drawings, as these are called, for a tick story I wrote that has not come out yet. So another world exclusive for you guys. But notice here, the artist here, Ian Nichols, has drawn the balloons in, and they have the numbers. And that's why I number the dialogue and the captions and that kind of stuff, so he can do these balloon placements on the page. The thing that I labeled 1 on the script, that's going to go there. 2 goes here, 3 goes here. Not everybody does that, but it's for the benefit of the letterer and the artist so they can figure out the balloon placement. Here, by the way, is the rough art for that script I was just showing you, right? That description of the forest and then the woodsman. You can see here's those sound effects that I wrote and so on, right? So just how that transitions, that page of script became that. Okay, so I know we're running out of time, but so let me switch to something a little bit more art focused. What does a professional page of comic book art look like? Well, I will show you. So let's see. This, let me stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? I can hit escape. And let me show you this. This is right here. This is a page by Cory Walker. This was the first tick story that I ever wrote. It was this one page. This is it. But you can see here, this is what a page of professional printed comics art looks like before it's printed, right? This is an 11 by 17 piece of Bristol board, right? Any kind of art supply store should have that. You can see here, this one was supplied to Cory by DC Comics. But so under these, they have that you can see, I hope a little bit, you can see those blue lines that help show you where the live print area is and that kind of stuff. But you don't have to have that. And in fact, you don't have to use this size necessarily, because a lot more stuff is being done digitally these days. Using Clip Studio would be like probably the most common piece of software used for using comics. But if you wanted to do a traditional, style, old school style art, which most publishers still use, you have something like this. And this is the original artwork for the cover for Tales from the Bully Pulpit, my first graphic novel. And a handy piece of advice, a little bit of math for you: 11 by 17. If you divide both of those by 2, you get 5.5 by 8.5, which is half the size of a normal piece of printer paper. Which means that if I take a piece of printer paper like this and fold it in half, I have a perfectly proportional sheet of paper that is going to look like a standard comic book trim size, like that I can use to make thumbnails right on this, and know that my proportions of my panel sizes is going to be right, because this is the same proportion as that finished art page. And similarly, it also means that that size piece of paper is really good for printing your own little, what they call mini comics, right? This, if I unfold this like this, it's basically a sheet of paper. But what I've got here is a, it's a little comic that I had printed, not me, this is my friend Kyle did this, but you can have this printed at a print shop, and it's easy. It's an easy way to have a finished physical comic that you published yourself, and it's a really nice size, and it's proportional to a standard comic book page. All right, did I use up all the time?
You did a great job. I will just say, I have loved this. I love seeing all the examples, all of the different ways that people can plan, because we know that planning is really important to drive your work along. But I love that we can do it in a way that best fits our needs and our process and our story. So thank you for sharing all those examples.
Of course.
We're going to fit just a couple of questions in here before we leave. One question is, what is the best advice that either someone has given you as a writer and a creator, or what's the best advice you could give these students as writers and creators?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is not me, because this is advice I have received, and that is that perfect is the enemy of good, and perfect is the enemy of done. One of my biggest issues as a creator is I have anxiety about creating things. I want them to be perfect. In my mind, I imagine every criticism, everything I make could receive. And so in my head, I have this perfect image of how things want to be. And when it gets down on the page, it doesn't feel the same. And that's killing me. That's keeping me from getting work done, right? A done comic is better than the perfect image that's in your head that no one can see. Right? So do the thing. That's the best advice. Just do the thing. If it's not as good as it is in your head, so what? Do another thing. It'll be better because you learned from the last one. So yeah, make something good. Stop worrying about making it perfect. That's my best advice for you.
And you know what? I think that's the perfect way to end our visit today. You have been phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you guys for being with us. We really have enjoyed our time with you.